I'm Sarah Brown-Fraser and I'm part of the Activity Alliance team. Activity Alliance is the national charity focused on disabled people's inclusion in sport and activity. We've arranged this event to explore the impact of COVID-19 on disabled people's activity. To understand more about the challenges and ensure an inclusive response as restrictions ease. More than 500 people have signed up for the event today, which just shows how important the discussions are. It's a really challenging time for everyone right now, so we value your company. We at Activity Alliance want to grow a movement that changes attitudes for disabled people in sport and activity, but we can't do it alone, so thank you for your support. In a moment, I'll introduce you to our host, but a few notes first. Accessibility is important to us, so you will notice we have a British Sign Language interpreter and captions overlaid on the screen too. We're streaming this event on our website, activityalliance.org.uk, and our YouTube channel. We're also recording it. As with everything technical, we can not always guarantee perfect viewing, but we will do our best to ensure that the event is memorable for you. We did go out for questions ahead of the event, so you may hear your question amongst the discussions today. The hashtag we're using is on Twitter, #InclusiveResponse. So do join in if you can throughout the event. Now, I'm privileged to introduce you to Mark Woods, who is our host today. Hi, Mark.
Good morning, Sarah. Hi, how are you?
Great, thank you. And I've personally known you for over 20 years, so it's lovely to work alongside you in the next couple of hours. Mark is the chair of the Chartered Institute for the Management of Sport and Physical Activity, CIMSPA. He has 17 years under his belt as an international Paralympic swimmer, a former gold medalist, no less. Good morning.
Morning. I think I'm still a gold medalist, technically. And also, I have much more under my belt now that I've stopped swimming. But we can maybe discuss that later on. I'm delighted to be here. And it's really important, this topic, the impact that COVID's had on disabled, both in the short and the long term, is going to get discussed. And we've got all the important decision makers here to hear what they have to say on it. But more importantly, I'm looking forward to hearing what disabled people have to say about the changes they want to see.
Brilliant. So tell us about the schedule ahead, Mark.
Okay, so we have, I'm sure it's going to be a really thought-provoking 90 minutes ahead of us. Leaders from across sport and leisure. We'll hear from Barry Horne, CEO of Activity Alliance, Huw Edwards, CEO of ukactive, and Tim Hollingsworth, the CEO of Sport England. We've also got a video message from Baroness Tennegrey Thompson, which we will play for you later on. But first, we're delighted to have a face I'm sure you will recognise from the screens. Probably best known as the presenter on Channel 4's The Last Leg, Alex Brooker. Good morning, Alex.
Morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Very good. Thanks for joining us. I know you've got a busy schedule, and I'm sure you get asked to do a lot of these kind of events. Why is this one important to you?
I think personally, for me, over the course of my life, being able to do sport and kind of take part in sport and activities have always been a big thing for me. And I believe that we need to make more activities and sports as accessible for disabled people as possible, really.
Yeah, I'm sure many people watching this will absolutely agree with you. And later on, we've actually pulled together a video of where we've asked disabled people to describe in 3 words how they would sum up 2020, and we give you a little bit of warning about what your 3 words would be. We know we're not on the last leg now, and it's early in the morning, so I'm sure your language will be appropriate.
It would probably be, I don't know, something like not ideal, really. There we go. That's a playing a straight bat to it.
There you go. Not ideal, really.
Not I think ideal, that really is. That's kind of an understatement, but yeah, that's it. Really, it's been tough. So as I'm sure it has for lots of people as well.
I don't think anybody will disagree with not ideal, really. So you mentioned there that the activity was important to you. how's this year, the restrictions, the pandemic, how's that affected your ability to be physically active?
It's been difficult, really, because one of the big kind of activities I do every week is going to the gym, and I work with a personal trainer, albeit that you can't always see the results when I'm on last leg with my belly, but I do still go to the gym. And you know, that's a big part of me. And obviously the gyms were closed for a long spell in March, along with everything else, and of course now they are again. And that kind of, you know, in terms of an every week activity, it's been hard not being able to do that and have that equipment around. And you know, I know after the first lockdown, there was a big kind of surge in people going out to buy gym equipment and stuff like that. So it was hard to even get hold of stuff for home, really. So that's had a massive impact. The other thing, I kind of, you know, last year when I did the channel swim relay for Channel 4, you know, I really wanted to get out and do more of that this year and get a lot more coaching. And obviously that's been quite difficult as well. So yeah, it has kind of hampered me a little bit.
So how have you kind of worked around that? Have you done anything
Yeah,
specific?
I've been kind of, see, I went to the gym as soon as it opened and until it closed. And the big thing that I've done is that I've kind of replaced my big physical activity now is I've got a spin bike at home, which I've been using a lot. Like literally even the last week, I've managed to get myself into a schedule of going on it every other day for a really kind of decent spell. And I can see the results already in kind of, yeah, in the sort of scores I'm putting out on it. So that's a big thing for me, going on the spin, yeah, and doing kind of the classes and stuff like that on there, because it's just such good cardio. And especially for me with my prosthetic and kind of my left foot as well having problems, it's fairly low impact. It's not like running where you're kind of smashing your foot against the floor. So it's perfect for me. And kind of that's my big physical activity.
You know, so from my personal experience, I know that I always found it much easier to train when I had other people around me to train with, or you know, a coach there to have a conversation with, a bit like your personal trainer. They play a really important role in helping people stay active. How have you stayed motivated then? Because it's very different doing it at home compared to when you're out socializing with people.
Yeah, I mean, for me, kind of, you know, a couple of my friends got me into doing the Peloton bike, and like they're all on it, and we kind of do classes together, and it's really, I mean, it's really competitive, and it's like there's no kind of a concession for me having one leg. I don't accept that. They don't accept that. So I'm competing with people, and some of the other lads in the group are also professional sportsmen. So it's like it's a really high standard on there. But do you know what? I hold my own. There was the first month I had it, I wanted to beat my mate so much that I did a hill sprint in the last minute of like a 45-minute class, and ended up throwing up on the curtains in our bedroom, and my wife was absolutely furious with me. So that's a level of competition that I push on myself. And more recently, I've kind of been doing a charity kind of distance ride for something called Winter Wonder Wheels. And Adam Hills from Last Leg is also a team captain on another team. So I'm desperate to beat him as well. We're competitive. So I want to clock up more miles than him.
You always look competitive. And have you got plans to do more of that kind of competition with your other hosts?
Yeah, definitely. I think kind of with the Paralympics being postponed to next year, I'm sure we'll end up doing more challenges and stuff like that. And you know, I love being able to get into sport when I was younger. Was such a game changer for me. It really was. I can't describe it enough. When I got to play football with other disabled people for the first time, you know, all these different events. I used to go to disabled swimming club, and that was massive for me, because I was able to be given my own kind of specialized coaching. You know, it's a bit different, you know, swimming with my restrictions. And you know, even when I did sink or swim last year, you know, being able to be coached properly was so big for me. And it was hard, but at the same time it was so rewarding. And you know, there were times when earlier this year when I was swimming a bit more and I was getting so much better that I did half consider whether one day I might be able to do the channel on my own. And there's still a little part of me. It's still, because we didn't finish as a team because of the weather, there is part of me that's unfinished business. And I mean, yeah, I say that now from the comfort of my home and not in the middle of freezing cold water between Dover and Calais. But yeah, I wouldn't mind giving it another go one day. So we'll see how I get on.
So you probably feel as though you're having a one-to-one conversation with me here, Alex, but actually there's at least 500 people watching this, and it will go onto the YouTube channel. So that almost feels like a commitment to the nation there. So thank you for giving us the exclusive on that. That's excellent. So you touched there about the importance of when you were able to access sport and physical activity. So you've no doubt also experienced some barriers towards being able to do that as well. Could you share a little bit more about that, about specifically how you got over those barriers?
I think for me, kind of, when I was at school, I was very, my first day at school when I went to secondary school, the games teacher assumed that I couldn't swim. So put me in a kayak when everyone else did swimming lessons, and I was kind of spinning around in this kayak while the rest of them were doing lengths until someone said, Alex can swim further than me, at which point it was kind of, at that point there was a line drawn in the sand between us, and it was lovely because all through school I was kind of able, everything, cricket, I kind of found my own way, rugby, they always got me as included as possible. But I think, going outside of that, I wanted to play football a lot, and actually for me it was a case of, I was never going to be as good as able-bodied people, and for me a big thing was kind of being able to find a disabled football club to play for. And I did that when I was younger. When I was about 13, I went to an open day at a sports centre in Kent, and met someone who was starting a disabled football club, and that was a big part of my teenage life. And again later on, when I was in television, Arsenal in the community, the Arsenal Football Club Foundation, they started an amputee football team, and I got to play again. So it's kind of finding these clubs and stuff like that, and being able to access them. And also another big thing for me is believing that sometimes I believe I can't do things. So I've always assumed there's no way I'm ever going to be able to play golf. Literally never even consider it. My dad played golf, all my brothers play golf, loads of my mates do. I just assumed it's one of those things that I could never do, and I've never tried it. And literally I watched a video of a guy on Instagram who's got arms that are shorter than mine, and he's playing with a club that he puts underneath his armpit, and he's brilliant. He plays off like a free, which is insane. And it's like, I watched this guy and I was like, now I want to try golf. And that was my own barrier in my head, is just assuming I couldn't do something. So that's going to be, that's definitely the next big sport I want to try is golf. It's going to be like massive for me. So that's kind of, I
can hear the passion and excitement in your voice as you're sharing that.
Yeah, I think sometimes the barriers are kind of, maybe our own, maybe my own self-consciousness and things like that. And there are more people out there who are, providing opportunities for disabled people to play sport. And we're not talking, I don't realise not everyone can be a Paralympian, but just to be able to go out there and access it. And actually, from when I was a kid to now, things have got so much better. And I think maybe slightly I still have that mentality from when I was a child, that maybe there won't be opportunities, but in fact there are.
Well, we're going to cover this this morning, so I really appreciate your time, Alex. I know that you're super busy and you're about to jump in the car and head somewhere else. Thank you very, very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Mark. It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, I may do that swim, I may not, just to let everyone know. It's not.
Well, you've announced it now, so thank you for giving us the exclusive.
Thank you, Mark. Cheers.
Cheers, Alex. Thank you. So now, in the last few weeks, we've asked a range of disabled people to share what their 3 words would sum up 2020 for them. Here's a small snippet of what they had to say.
2020 in 3 words: eye-opening, unpredictable, and challenging.
Isolating, confusing, and frustrating.
COVID, lockdown, discrimination.
The pandemic in 3 words. What is happening?
It's just been crazy.
Different, exciting,
and also I'd say a challenge.
Nightmare from hell.
Interesting, different and eye-opening.
Yeah, a change, challenge and acceptance.
Which, like most people, I imagine, it's been difficult, demanding and challenging.
Insightful words there from disabled people, and it's a good point to bring into the conversation Barry Horne, Activity Alliance's Chief Executive. Good morning, Barry.
Hi, Mark.
So you heard some of the words there from people. What did that make you think and feel?
I did. You know, I mean, really powerful. We've got a great group of speakers today, but it's just so crucial to hear those messages directly. And yeah, two of the people in there, Giant, who said difficult, demanding and challenging, and Asmita said nightmare from hell. They're both people I've got to know quite well over the last few years, but I think what's really significant is just how different their context is. You know, Giant's a former, well, he might not like the former bit, he was an elite athlete, tennis player, Paralympian, who's out there coaching, and his home context is having spent most of the year in lockdown in Leicester, and that has a big impact. Asmita, I met her about a year ago, and I would class her as perhaps one of the most positive people I've met, and yet today she's describing the year as nightmare from hell. And you know, I think that's really significant. Asmita's backstory is so different to Giant's as well. Someone who had a very challenging life, and it was only in her 50s through our Get Out, Get Active program, actually, that she discovered activity and networks and links, and has absolutely blossomed. But it's definitely a year of setback for individuals as well as for us as a whole.
Yeah, and with disabled people accounting for 1 in 5 in our population, the inequalities are widening as we progress through this pandemic. Could you paint a picture for us, Barry, about what did sport and activity for disabled people look like before the pandemic, and what does it look like now?
Yeah, you know, that's one of the frustrating things that we feel like people were starting to do more of the right things to engage disabled people effectively into activity, and that more, you know, year on year, I think over the last 3 years, we saw a 1% improvement, and I'll just say a bit more in a second about the measure, but we were seeing an improvement in the first couple of months of the pandemic this year. We just saw that massively change. So we use a particular measure that is inactivity levels. So that's people who do less than 30 minutes a week activity, and that can be in 10-minute chunks. So if you imagine a situation where you've got people who are not active even to that level, the impact on their lifestyle and their health is profound, really. But we were starting to chip away at that number, which we were really pleased with. But it still represents a number that's almost twice as many as for non-disabled people. So there's nearly 4 million disabled people across England who are not getting that benefit of activity. We were seeing progress, but there's no doubt with the impact of the pandemic, our work got harder as the situation for disabled people got harder. But our determination, in a sense, grows because the importance of getting this right could never be more real.
No, 100% agree. And so can you describe a little bit about the work the Activity Alliance has been doing to help the sports and activity organisations from an organisational point of view?
Yeah, and I mean, and that's our purpose, Mark. You know, we exist to support other organisations, really, to think about how they engage disabled people in sport and activity more effectively. And in normal times, a lot of that work is about looking at perhaps how they communicate differently, how they engage disabled people more proactively, where activity takes place, what kind of principles should be applied at the point of delivery, so that we're actually finding out from people what they need to make a session work for them. So there's quite a lot of things that we've been doing over the last 20 years in our existence, and our members and partners are really key to that. The work that different organisations, national disability sport organisations, the national governing bodies, the work that people are doing is fundamental. So we exist to support those organisations, but a big part of what we've realised, and the pandemic's reinforced this, is that we probably just need to focus more on a couple of things, and the two things, but big things. Changing attitudes towards disabled people in sport and activity, really fundamental, but also we need to look at embedding inclusive practice. And during the pandemic, we've obviously had to adapt that more. We've been working in a context clearly where we've needed to think about, well, how can we support or connect people to advice and information about how to be active at home. Critically, the guidance piece about sports and leisure operatives getting ready to bring activity back after the first pandemic wave, after the first lockdown. We wanted to try and influence that guidance to be sure that it was inclusive and worked for disabled people. So there's quite a lot in that. And I think the most important thing is that we shifted the narrative from one that perhaps said disabled people they're vulnerable, so we need to protect and shield, to one that said, actually, this is a group who need activity more than anyone, so please prioritise.
And can you give maybe a little bit of insight into any specific challenges that you face as you've gone through that process? But also, I'm interested about maybe some of the opportunities that might arrive out of it, and try and see some of the positives.
Yeah, no, and I think that's important, Mark, because what we have a chance to do as we plan for reinvigorating sport and activity is to reset the dial, to just put inclusion as a core principle in everything that we do. I don't think that anyone should be spending money on sport and activity that's not capable of working for disabled people. Now, that might seem quite extreme, but it's a sort of simple proposition that why would you actually plan for activity that actively excludes groups of people who need that activity most? So I think, and we're seeing great signs of that, and you'll hear later from Tim Hollingsworth, but I think the Sport England's strategic positioning and the emphasis on inequalities and the importance being placed on making sure everybody benefits from the great things that come from being active are there. And we are seeing some of that commitment coming through. And we're also seeing some changes in practice, Mark. There are different ways of being able, that we've learned through this period of lockdown, of communicating out to people and supporting them in their desire to be active.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there. So I guess if you this discussion is super important today, and I guess if you're looking for an output from today, it's that sense that everybody is willing and wanting to reset to aim for better outcomes for people with disabilities, disabled people in the coming years.
And I think that's right. And it's not that we're saying that we're starting from day one, because people were increasingly developing inclusive practice, and it definitely was getting better. I think what we've got to do is to just give more momentum to that intent and make sure it's absolutely central to everything that we do when we turn to sport and activity.
Great, thank you, Barry. And I know you'll be joining us at the end of this event when we have Tim Hollingsworth from Sport England coming online as well.
Thanks,
now, one of the leaders. Thank you, Barry. Now, one of the leaders who's trying to drive change in our country is Activity Alliance's honorary president and UK Active's chair, Baroness Tanny Gray-Thompson. Now, unfortunately, she couldn't join us today, but last week she recorded an interview with Sarah.
We're privileged to be joined today by our Honorary President, Baroness Tanni Gray-Thompson. For the interest of people watching this, we're recording this ahead of the event to ensure we capture Tanni's extremely useful points on this topic. Hi, Tanni, thanks for joining us.
Hello.
So there's no getting away from it. The statistics for disabled people in COVID are really stark. What's your take on it?
It's been devastating for so many people in terms of the compulsory do not resuscitate orders at the beginning of lockdown. People struggling with work, coming out of lockdown, we're going back into lockdown, and the impact it's had on physical activity and mental well-being, as well as what has been just devastating. So my real worry is that disabled people will just be lost in society and they'll just be forgotten about while there's lots of other things going on.
We've been asking disabled people in the run-up to this event what 3 words sum up 2020. What would you sum up your 2020 with?
Shielding, challenge, and kind of cancellation of the Paralympics. So it's been hard. I mean, it's been different. I've never spent so much time at home. I've never spent so much time with my family. I've been able to be physically active in a different way, but then I've also missed going to the gym and leisure centre, and so I think for everybody it's been an unbelievably difficult time. And at the moment, the challenge, we don't know where this is going to end. It's had a huge impact on, if you look at the number of disabled people who've died because of COVID, it's a huge percentage, and you look at the challenges from going forward, it feels like never ending at the moment.
Yeah. So obviously you're very well known for being a former Paralympian. How have you found being active during lockdown and with the added restrictions?
It's been really difficult not being able to access the equipment in the gym that I'm used to, because actually when I stopped being an athlete, I got rid of all the stuff in our garage, which was a big mistake. And it's been amazing once lockdown eased, actually, how seriously the sector took it in terms of spacing and cleaning and ventilation and on all those things. But it has been hard because being locked in one room, doing everything on a computer screen, I think it's been really wearing and exhausting for a lot of people. So that work-life physical activity balance is even more important. And, for disabled people who need carers and support to be active or to just go out and do anything, that has been really difficult as well. It feels like it's never ending.
And we know that COVID has widened the inequalities that existed already for disabled people in our society. What have you seen that concerns you from a personal perspective and in your leadership roles?
The positive out of it is that, working from home now has become more accepted. So actually for a lot of disabled people, the really difficult commute on and above everything that any other non-disabled person has to do has been eased slightly. But the worry with the assumption that either people are shielding or not shielding or can come out, I think the messages have been quite unclear. So my real worry is that disabled people in the workplace, in physical activity and sport, will be forgotten because we're not going to see them because they're not on public transport at the moment. The real worry is they'll be forgotten. And it's almost like the battle for the DDA and some things we were fighting for years and years ago will be starting, closer to zero again, just trying to get, even any kind of representation, let alone equal representation.
And your role in the House of Lords and as ukactive chair gives you a strong position to help guide what the future looks like in policy. So what changes would you like to see across sport and leisure in policy that, supports disabled people to lead more active lives?
I mean, right now, the big fight is about keeping gyms and leisure provision open and making sure that government understand it's part of community health. We know SAGE have said in September, shutting gyms, it's a massive impact on physical and mental health and well-being. So, we need to change that. But beyond that, it's about, I think partly, not just about the physical accessibility of buildings, but making sure the attitude of people who welcome disabled people in is there. But it's also about disabled people demanding more physical activity. It's hard when you're fighting for education and work and social care and all those other things, but actually the demand needs to come from disabled people where they see the benefit of being physically active. And it's not about the Paralympics. I mean, that's great. It gave me an amazing platform, but that's a tiny number of people and it's not realistic. And we've got to move away from you're a Paralympian or you're nothing. Actually, we just need more people being able to be active and play sport who aren't very good, but do it because they like it, rather than because they're thinking about a talent pathway.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tanni.
Thank you.
So, as Tony rightly says, whatever happens in the future, we need to ensure disabled people are part of the solution. We need to demand more and not settle for second best. And I'm sure our next guest will agree. Sam James is an award-winning fitness instructor, personal trainer and disability fitness expert. She lives and breathes inclusion, using her lived experience and specialist knowledge to improve how the fitness industry caters for the needs of disabled people. Hi, Sam.
Morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you very much for joining us. We heard you earlier on in the video when you shared your 3 words to sum up 2020. You said, it's been crazy. How has the pandemic impacted on your life exactly?
So I've gone from teaching like 14, 15 classes a week face-to-face in gyms, day provisions for those with disabilities, care homes, and I've gone down to teaching 6 online. So I've gone from being very, very active to virtually non-active. I've gone from like working an active job to sitting at home on the computer all day, like most people, and it had a really bad impact on my own cerebral palsy. So I went from, like, my balance got a lot worse, my mobility, I became very stiff. So if I went to sit down, it took me ages to stand up because my muscles wasn't engaging as they were a month or 2 months before. Yeah.
Huge impact on you personally, and you must have found that many of your clients had similar things going on. You know, can you share some of the things that they found challenging?
Yeah, so a lot of my clients use a gym for like physiotherapy because as adults with disabilities, we don't actually get physio long term. We only get 6 sessions of physio, and then they signpost out into the community. So obviously the gyms are very important in the rehabilitation of long-term condition management. So even for me and my clients, not being able to go to the gym, not being able to go to their normal sessions, regardless if it was an exercise class, trampolining, swimming, whatever, they couldn't go. And a lot of disabled people like sociable exercise. They don't like working out at home on their own. They like to be around other people because they lack that social interaction anyway. So you take that social interaction away, that's one huge barrier that they now have to face, and another one in trying to manage their conditions at home as well.
Yeah, I mean, we touched earlier with Alex that need to stay motivated, and it is, as you say, much harder when you're stuck at home. And you also raise a really important point about how gyms and fitness centres and leisure centres play an important part in society in terms of the general well-being. It's not all about some of the images that maybe people have of gyms with the rippling muscles of bodybuilders. It's about real people needing support in their community, isn't it? So could you maybe give us some advice on, if you were talking to instructors and trainers that are out there, and they want to either now or in the future provide more inclusive and accessible sessions for disabled people, what advice would you give them?
I would say that don't be scared. A lot of instructors have that fear. So if a disabled person walks into a class, they would be like, oh, what do I do? They have no idea. As soon as you've got to like regress a class or regress your movement, they actually panic and they get scared. And sometimes it's not about the regressions, because take me for an example. If I went to a very slow aerobics class, it wouldn't do me any good because I need to keep moving the whole time. So it's not always about the pace. It's not always about the movement. It's about talking to that disabled person, finding out about their condition, finding out how it affects them. Can they actually adapt it themselves? Because most will walk up and they will just adapt as they go within their own movement, within their own capabilities. And if they are feeling if they don't have any confidence or have no idea what to do, there's loads of qualifications out there and CPD now for working with disabled clients, and to get on the level 3 exercise and disability qualification, get on other CPDs that are out there just to enhance their knowledge so that they feel confident. but it's also making sure that centres and the venues that instructors use are fully inclusive, because they need to have ramps, they need to have lifts, they need to be able to have like doors that have the touch doors so that they can open automatically. There's quite a lot that people need to think about.
So I think again, I 100% agree with you. I knew I would, Sam. That need to just as an instructor to use the knowledge that you have and adapt it, but actually have a conversation with the person in front of you about how that might work, and support them in finding their own way through the exercise. I think that's really great advice. Now if you could give we've talked about advice for the instructors. What about the people who deliver leisure and sport for disabled people? You know, once we're through the crisis, what would you ask them to change?
It'd be good to see more partnerships. So obviously, like, you could partnership with local charities. Like you got like Parkinson's UK, you've got Adult CP Hub, you've got like MS Society, to be able to deliver more inclusive sessions. And even local councils do a lot of disability sport sessions or exercise referral sessions, making sure that it's really fully hooked up with everything that's going on in the local community, and to use the instructors where if disabled people like to have the same instructor, they like to have that continuity. They like to know that they can trust that one person or the group of people, so they know they've got 3 or 4 faces there. They know they can trust those 3 or 4 faces, not a different instructor every week, because that would just really confuse a lot of disabled people. And to make sure that they're fully knowledgeable and they're trained on the different outcomes of different disabilities and how different scenarios within the gym could affect like autistic clients. So loud music is a no, because that can really set them all into a meltdown. So it's just understanding everything out there, but also it's recognising like we have instructors. Like I'm a level 4 instructor, so it's recognising that there is a level 4s out there, and we are really well trained in what we do, and that we have really good underpinning knowledge within the actual rehab world, or we have connections with physios. I have connections not just with the NHS physios, but with private physios, private sports therapists. So I've got a big round of people I can refer to, so that if there's people that come to me, I then could refer on to the centre for long-term management for them to engage with mainstream sessions as well.
Fantastic. And so we're saying consistency, quality. Yeah. Let's make sure we deliver the right quality, and actually look out there for the people that have the right qualifications to deliver that consistency and quality.
And it's also about breaking down barriers, because obviously disabled people don't want to be segregated. They want to be included in mainstream sessions. They don't want to be like in like a disability class. They want to be included within normal able-bodied people. They want to be like part of valued in society and not actually being treated any differently.
Quite right. Now, in the minute that we've got left, Sam, tell me what you're most looking forward to when we come out of this pandemic.
I'm looking forward to going back to the gym and also being able to have a full class again, and not a class of 5 or 6 people, and actually fully engaged with all my actual ladies. So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to.
That's great. Thank you ever so much for joining us, Sam. Really appreciate it, and best of luck. Fantastic there to hear from Sam. And our next guest is the perfect person to follow on from Sam. Huw Edwards is the CEO of ukactive, the not-for-profit health body with a mission to get more people more active more often. He was also, he's been enrolled since July 2019, and prior to that within the organisation was the Director of Public Affairs, Communications and Research. During his career at ukactive, Huw has played a really important role in shaping their strategy, but also in leading organisations' engagement with the government and wider stakeholders. So Huw, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Nice to see you.
Morning, Mark, and morning everybody on the webinar. Fantastic discussion so far.
Yes, great discussions, and I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your insights, because obviously you interface directly with the leisure sector and the people delivering, the organisations delivering. Can you share with us some of the challenges that the sector has faced and how ukactive has responded to those challenges?
Absolutely, Mark. And I think the challenges probably fall into what we can control and what we can't control in some respects. So looking at what we can control, obviously this year has been a devastating period for the whole sector. But what we've tried to do throughout this is collaborate. So obviously a lot of collaboration with the ukactive members during that first lockdown period, building up to a reopening across the 4 nations. We worked very much on the development of the framework with Sport England, with partners like Activity Alliance, to make sure that guidance was inclusive and was COVID secure and inclusive of and explicit on the equality expectations that it required. In addition to that, we worked quite closely with Barry and the team on webinars with our members, making sure that there was clear understanding of the opportunities to make sure you could have an inclusive return to the gyms and leisure centres, the reopening activity guidance that the team brought out at Activity Alliance. So, and also when we did reopen, making sure that we were able to work with partners on a day-to-day basis to address any issues. That's within our control. What hasn't been in our control is obviously the decision-making around closure. And, you know, as a number of people have discussed already, the frustration in the second lockdown, especially in England. This is a decision which is inaccurate. It is a wrong decision to be closing the sport and fitness sector at this time, because the implications of this closure are actually going to lead to stronger and worse health implications around physical inactivity and mental health. So on that side, we will continue to lobby relentlessly to make sure that the sector is given the recognition it requires in this period. But to be clear, you know, the real frustration around the second lockdown, because it's been unnecessary, given all the work the sector has done in collaboration to make it COVID secure in the first lockdown.
Yeah, because there are lots of stats out there about the rate of infection that in terms of your likelihood of getting infected at a leisure facility, and also maybe you might share some of the data that there is on the savings to the NHS of the leisure sector.
Absolutely. So, you know, the recent study which came out with, I know Tim's on later, with Sheffield Hallam and the work at Sport England has shown that the incredible economic value obviously of the sector, the social value it provides, and the savings across many different areas. You know, hundreds of millions of pounds are saved on addressing issues of long-term health conditions, type 2 diabetes, mental health, cardiovascular disease. The own statistic that we brought out recently with Professor Greg White was showing that 66% of prehab and rehab services, cancer support services, were taking place in fitness and leisure centres. When you close the sector, you're not just closing sport and fitness, you're closing treatment, which is supporting cancer patients, for example. And this widens into the realm we are here as well, in terms of the inclusive offer we need to provide as a sector and the role we play in the societies that we serve.
Yeah, and Sam touched on that earlier as well. And as you'll have heard earlier, we were asking people to share their 3 words to sum up 2020. Now I'm going to slightly twist it for you. I wonder whether you could give us 3 words on behalf of, you know, what are the 3 words that describe what the leisure sector needs to do to ensure disabled people's needs are met?
I think the 3 words there, Mark, would be understanding. You know, really understanding the impact, and the impact especially on disabled customers who are coming into our facilities, so that there is the level of service there, working very closely with organisations like Activity Alliance, and Sam was fantastic in terms of the guidance that she was providing, because she is on the coalface and supporting that cohort day in, day out. I think collaboration then, widening the partnerships that require beyond the great support we get with Sport England, Activity Alliance, but also into those wider charitable services which are on a local level as well. And then respect, you know, making sure that the sector is fully respectful of the community that it's serving, but also we secure that respect also from government in understanding what essential services we play. You know, we're looking to categorise the sector as an essential service in society. We need to do some more work to ensure that's really consolidated, but pushing into government to say, look, hey, we're an essential service providing essential support within the communities in which we operate in.
Sam talked about what it's like to be a disabled person accessing service, but also what it's like to work in the sector. What commitment can you make to disabled people to ensure that hers and many other disabled people's needs are met when activity does eventually resume?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think number one, in terms of commitments, and the commitments need to be more than just the words I say now. It's going to be the actions we undertake over the next 12 to 18 months as we start to come out of this yo-yo of closure. Number one is listening. Number one is making sure we're listening to disabled people who want to have a longer-term sustained relationship with our sector. The second is securing that essential status with government. You know, the categorization of our sector away from just being something that people see as sport and fitness, but the wider holistic public health service that we provide, and securing that. The third will then be reassurance of customers returning, making sure that we are as COVID secure as we can be. This is going to be a scenario that's going to be around for a long period of time, Mark, and so we need to make sure that when customers do return, we're giving them the safest possible environment. And the third is around consistency of standards. Tanny announced last week that we're working with partners like SimSpa and Sport England and wider partners, and with Activity Alliance on the development of a new consistent standard across the sector, which looks at both the health and safety, but also inclusivity as well. And then finally, it's it's how we then work those partnerships. You know, we've got a really good partnership with Sport England, working with Tim and Adam Blaze there. You know, I've made a commitment to bring in, head of inclusion into our organisation, Tim Mathias, who's going to be leading that work, working with partners. This is something which we are firmly committed to make sure that these facilities that we have and the importance of facilities we have service the community which they operate in, and that's me giving that commitment to then deliver on those actions.
So in many ways, what you're describing there is exactly what's required, but it's almost, I'm hearing, and I've heard it earlier today, is that there is an opportunity here to, whilst we are looking at how everything is delivered, to deliver it differently and better for disabled people.
Absolutely. There's a big buzzword this week, Mark, which you appreciate, which is reset, right? And there needs to be a reset on public health. So we need to be, we're going to look at ourselves. We're going to look at the service we're operating in, how we provide, in terms of our infrastructure, in terms of our programs, in terms of our workforce, obviously working closely with Tara and the team at SimSpa, and making sure that we provide the most inclusive service that we possibly can be. The challenge we then play into government is you need to look at us differently. You need to really understand that the health inequalities that are deep and fault lines that run through our society now are not going to be served by continual closure of the sector. And we need to be much more visible in the government's plans for how they reset their own ambitions around public health as well.
Well, I'm a big advocate of everything that you've said there, Huw. So thank you very much for sharing it with everybody online today, and hopefully you'll be able to listen to some of the input we've got from other people. So thank you again, Huw.
Thanks, Mark.
So our final video today is disabled people talking about the specific impact COVID-19 has had on their lives.
Being disabled, I didn't realise the effect that it would have on me, but my balance got worse. I kept falling over all the time. I was really stiff. Some days I couldn't stand up from the chair.
It's hard enough to actually get in there in the first place, so transport, etc. And then actually having accessible activities in a pandemic is virtually nil and void.
The COVID pandemic has made it really difficult for me to join in other activities, group activities that take place on Zoom, because it's so difficult to hear.
I lost my confidence in going out and walking. I didn't exercise at all until I started walking again with Sarah from GoGo.
When the lockdown restrictions were first announced, my routine took a real hit, but since then I've bought kettlebells, a skipping rope, and found some really nice local running routes.
So I was really, really missing the gym and had to adapt to the home workout life.
It's very moving to hear just a small number of disabled people talking about the impact this year has had on them. And I personally want to take the opportunity to thank them for recording those messages for us. And as I watch them, as challenging as it has been, I also hear some of the same sentiment that we've heard during the rest of this morning, and that's one of opportunity and hope, and that really stood out for me. I'm now delighted to be joined by Janet and Sarah, who live in Manchester. Janet is deafblind, and due to her medication, she has to make sure she exercises regularly. Prior to lockdown, Janet took part in lots of activities at her local gym, and exercise plays an important role for Janet's emotional, mental, and physical well-being. Stress relief and social interaction. We've heard about that as well, the importance of the social interaction. Sarah works for the charity Sense and supports Janet through the week. Before pandemic, they took part in a huge number of sports and activities and travelled the globe together. Thank you for joining us, guys. Nice to see you there.
Nice to see you. Nice to meet you.
So, Janet and Sarah, we've been asking disabled people to sum up 2020 in 3 words. Could you both of you share what your 3 words would be?
3 words you describe 2020. The 3 words I describe 2020 are strange, uncertain days. The reason for this is I have to wear gloves and masks if I go anywhere. I've got to queue up and social distance everywhere. I don't really like it at all. I'm really, really nervous in case I catch coronavirus.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And Sarah, it's a similar thing for you, I guess. What might your 3 words be?
Oh dear, my 3 words. Similar to
I put you on the spot there because I wasn't going to ask you that, was I?
I think similar to Janet, really. It's been a very difficult time, and also for social interaction for Janet, really. She's, like you say, very, very active, and we've been sort of isolated here. So it is a very strange time and a difficult time for people with disabilities.
Strange, difficult time. Absolutely, yeah. 100%. So now I said in the intro, and I've heard about you guys. You were super active before lockdown. Could you share a little bit about the kind of thing that you used to be able to do, and how you've been trying to keep active with all the restrictions?
Before lockdown. So before lockdown, we used to regularly go to the gym. We took part in spinning classes and swimming, abdominals and spine and posture, also weight management. We used to go for walks as well. To deaf clubs, meet friends and family. And also we were in a sign choir as well. Also in 2011, we did the Race for Life. We raised money for cancer charities. That's what we did before lockdown, wasn't it? So yes.
And how have you managed to keep active now?
So lockdown now. So lockdown, you do what? So since lockdown, for me, I've had to stay in my flat. It's been very boring at times just having to stay in the one place. I've tried to keep active on my spinning bike and using my Wondercar Smart to do some exercises. I've also been learning Spanish and Spanish Sign Language. Just kept me active. Also, I like drumming, Tai Chi, and yoga from Sense Active. Sense Active. It's been very good. It's been very good.
Wow. Plenty. You sound busy, even though you are stuck in your flat.
But you're very busy. We are very busy. We have been.
And more broadly, how has I mean, you've touched on it and the challenges, what you don't like about lockdown. How has the pandemic and lockdown restricted your life generally?
Well, for Janet, of course, she's had to stay put in a flat. She was restricted under the shielding group to start with. So she couldn't do anything, couldn't go out. She could only walk in the park. That was it. There was nothing she could do, really. And there wasn't anything provided for us to start with until Sense Active came. And then that was fantastic, wasn't it? We did drumming and yoga and Tai Chi, and she's in the group. She's enjoyed them very much. And the people that she enjoys, been with. It's been really good sense active, but to begin with, it was very difficult for Janet, being both deaf and blind, because she can't watch television or listen to music, or so her sports is very important to her.
And can you explain a little bit for those that people don't know sense active, exactly kind of what that looks like, what's offer, how that works?
We have different activities. We have a timetable every week, and then you can book which activities that you would like to choose. Some are live sessions, or some are pre-videoed sessions, and you can choose. There's all sorts of things, from drumming, from dance, there's music, yoga, tai chi. There's a variety of different things to suitable for all people and all their various disabilities and abilities.
What are the favourite ones?
Favourite for you? Which is your favourite? Janet's saying she started in June with Sense Active, and drumming, tai chi, and yoga. Your one, which? The one I enjoyed the most, really, I think, is when I dressed up for Halloween for the drumming. We dressed up as witches with green faces. Looked like witches with hats that danced, and she really enjoyed that, along with the drumming session. And everybody made a very good effort. It was really good. It was a good group.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. Can we see that online anywhere? I feel as though I need to look that up.
We can send you a photograph.
That sounds great. Thank you. So what changes would you make? As we think about hopefully coming out of this situation and in the not too distant future, what changes would you make to sport and physical activity to make it easier for you guys to partake in it and more enjoyable?
I think for the future, to make it easier for Janet, going to the gyms at the moment, we've got to social distance, which means I can't show her anything. I can't show her how to do a spinning class. I can't demonstrate the abdominal classes to her, because I have to social distance from her, and I can't pedal with her. So it's very difficult for me to show her what she needs to know. So that will be difficult in the future for her to do. But we could do with that changing, so it makes it more accessible for me to be able to show her without having to social distance. Obviously, I can continue to wear PPE, but it's important that I show her, correctly how to do what everybody else is doing, the moves and exercise.
And you highlight a challenge that everybody who's watching today needs to be reminded of, is that the solutions, the creative solutions that are being created, don't always work for people with disabilities, do they?
No, they don't. We understand the reason for social distance, but then when it comes to demonstrating with Janet for sports and activities, it makes it very, very difficult when we've got to be apart, because she can't see like the tutor, so she doesn't know what's happening and when she needs to speed up or slow down, or how to demonstrate things. It's really difficult for her.
Yeah. Okay. And if we had a magic wand and we can make it all go back to how it was before, which was much better than it is now, there would still be things that you could improve upon. What would you say to the people that are putting on sport for people with disabilities? What would you like to see improve?
I don't think to us it's been fantastic, hasn't it, with the Sense Active and all the people who Paul and who else, Michael, Ms, Abby, Louis. They've all been exceptionally helpful, and they've timetable sent to us, and they've been very patient with me and my technology skills, which are not my forte. But they've been very helpful. So the improvements are outside, really, is to get back into activities at the gym, which would be excellent for Janet. But like I say, because of the restrictions, it's difficult, the social distance, for me to show her. So.
Well, fingers crossed we do get back to some sense of normality. Janet and Sarah, thank you ever so much for sharing your stories with us today. And I look forward to receiving that photograph of the drumming witches.
Okay, right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
So we're delighted now to be joined by Tim Hollingsworth, Sport England's Chief Executive. Tim has been in his role at Sport England since 2018. Previously, he was Chief Executive at the British Paralympic Association, leading the organisations through both the historic London 2012 Games and Rio 2016. Prior to the BPA, he was also at UK Sport for 7 years, first as Director of Policy and Communications and then Chief Operating Officer. Thanks for joining us, Tim.
Well, good morning, Mark, and good morning to everyone on the webinar as well. I'm absolutely delighted to be here.
So, Tim, you heard what Janet was saying there about how the pandemic has impacted on her life and how active she is.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the 14 million other Janets that are around the country, who sometimes maybe feel as though they're not heard when the national strategies for sport and for physical activity are put together?
Well, I think that was a brilliant conversation to listen to. I'm actually still reeling from the fact that Janet's also learning Spanish, Spanish, which is just incredible. But from an activity point of view, just talking with Janet and Sarah there, Mark, you brought to life fundamentally what we should be looking at in terms of both national strategies, but also organisational response. Those of us with some responsibility for the environment in which everyone seeks to be active, because what that conversation brought out for me was two things, really. It's both the challenge, the significant challenge that we have anyway, and that this period and this pandemic has exacerbated. But also, and you sort of focused in on it at the end, the sort of opportunity and the hope that can come from this, that I'm really glad everybody appears to be emphasising through the course of this morning. I think it's our job, really, as Sport England, to try and show that as a national perspective and lead that as a national perspective, both in terms of recognising the challenge, responding to it, and then creating sort of maximum opportunity for people to benefit. I think one of the things that I know will have come out today anyway, but from our point of view, we need to be really clear, is that we understand that this is a pandemic that has made an existing situation worse. This has not suddenly, created a whole new world for disabled people in terms of activity. There was still a challenge relative to non-disabled people and other sections of society. What has happened, though, of course, is we've seen it get much worse and that inequality widen. So I think it's beholden on us to therefore, you asked about strategies, to be very clear and very overt that actually tackling that is a priority from a Sport England point of view and from our own point of view in terms of lobbying with government alongside so many other great organisations, thinking about their own emerging national strategy for disabled people, and making sure that the need to understand the challenge that disabled people face, so much of it came out in the videos as well that you've been showing, is recognised. And then we both strategically and then in terms of our resource and our investment and our support, make sure we overcome it. And that can often be, increasingly for me, about making sure that we're then working with the people who understand the issues at the level where we can actually affect change. So organisations, so many of which are on the call today, and so many individuals who are on the call today, who actually we need to provide the tools and the opportunity to make a difference to people's lives.
And I mean, Sporting has got such a huge remit in terms of the various groups, disadvantaged groups in society, and how we support them in being more active. How do you prioritise in such a challenging situation that we find ourselves in?
Well, I think from the word go, really, we've tried to be focused on two things, Mark. One of which is, it seems a sort of dreadful way to describe it, but the sort of supply side. What do we need to do to keep the opportunity for those who are supporting activity, providing activity, or the facilities in which they happen? And it was great listening to Huw earlier. What can we do to help and support that and maintain that? In some cases, help it to survive. In others, help it to really continue to make the best opportunity available. And then on the other side of the coin, how can we champion demand in that sense? How can we really make sure that people understand what is possible, even in this pandemic, and also why that matters? And I think today's been brought out hugely, whether that was just listening to the impact on Janet's individual life, or whether, you know, the way that Huw was talking really powerfully about the broader social point that can be made about the benefit to public health. So I think all the way through the pandemic, we've tried to be focused around those two priorities. And in some ways, it's made us keener and more aware than perhaps previously where we can make a difference. I certainly think and hope that the resource and the funding that we've been able to provide has helped. Some of that has been crucially into organisations, not least the Activity Alliance, supporting our partners who we know can make a real difference more on the ground, recognising that we can do that through being more flexible with the money that we provide and what it's used for. Recognising too that if we can provide a bit more certainty, so we've given a number of organisations, including many disability organisations, an element of certainty of funding for next year as well, which can help with planning and help with, you know, keeping things going. But also being very clear about where the gaps are and where we think we need to make urgent calls now. And I'm quite proud of some of our response in terms of those open funds, and particularly the fund that we launched earlier this year, the Tackling Inequalities Fund, because that was deliberately recognizing that this was not an equal or level playing field in many cases, and we probably needed to be more interventionist in where our money went to make the biggest difference. And so whether that was working directly with Disability Rights UK or MenCap or Disability Sports Coach, or whether it was, you know, working more regionally with the Active Partner Network, and I know the Activity Alliance has done a really good job of working with them in supporting and in guiding where resources could best be placed. That's a really important imperative for me, that we didn't just listen to those who shouted loudest or those who are most prominent in our thinking, but we increasingly recognize that to really help people and make a difference to their lives, we need to understand almost the unusual suspects with whom we have to work to get our support and our resource to them. So I think thinking through that, there's a fund open at the moment, the Return to Play Fund, which I really would advocate again for groups, community groups, sports clubs, who are thinking about when we are able to return. And there will be considerable continued restrictions in place. There will be COVID secure environments that need to be created. This fund is geared towards helping organizations with that. And again, wanting to be more strategically favoring those organizations who can help those in most of need, and perhaps those who felt previously excluded in the system. So a lot of that is about resource, Mark, but I think also just quickly, and you've been very aware of this, I know, and many on this call will be as well, that that's simply actually not the principal job. The principal job is trying to maintain activity levels, and providing people with the opportunity is one thing, but also the motivation, the confidence, recognizing that sometimes people might not be aware of what's possible. So we've been very focused as well in our campaigning and advocacy work to make sure that we also show what is possible. The Join the Movement campaign was geared with specific thinking, again, around disabled people earlier this year, to supporting people in thinking, well, in the lockdown period, even in the national lockdown period, what can I still do to remain active? And we heard of ways that Janet and Sarah approached it. But also, you know, the ongoing campaigns that we have, not least the We Are Undefeatable campaign, which is working with long-term health condition charities to really engage their beneficiaries. How can we continue to provide messaging that supports activity while we also know there's so much challenge?
And Janet and Sarah talked about the challenge that they have, that it's almost disproportionate for people, for disabled people, that the way COVID has impacted them. You know, Sarah spoke about not being able to communicate with Janet and explain to her what's happening because she has to social distance from her. That must be happening thousands of times around the country right now. What concerns you most about that how this is disproportionately affecting disabled people?
I think we're seeing in our evidence and our understanding and also our interaction with communities, there's initially, I think it was very much a sort of health risk element. So the requirement around shielding, the restriction that brought, further on people's lives, that was a real concern. But I think what we've picked up more recently is actually mirrored by what Janet and Sarah said, and also in the film that was shown just beforehand, which is there's also now a real need to bolster confidence and actually for people to feel confidence about being active. You heard Richard Whitehead talk about public transport and getting to locations and facilities. I completely understand that in itself adds another layer of complexity and challenge and risk. to disabled people who might be worried about, the contact points that might provide. And equally, I think we can recognise that facilities and traditional sports settings, may not be as accommodating or inclusive of disabled people's needs in their offer, particularly when restrictions are in place around what is and isn't possible. So I think that confidence point's the bit that's worried me the most, because we were actually seeing, before the pandemic hit, for the first time, some meaningful change in activity levels. I think the confidence that we, using that word in this context, but that we could actually start to see that some of the decisions we were taking as an organisation and the sport disability sport team that we have in Sport England, leading to some great work on the ground to actually start building sustainable improvements in the levels of activity. But seeing that going backwards, whilst perhaps not surprising, is a real concern. And I think we need to be overt in our challenge to that, and particularly recognise that we need to create environments which are genuinely confidence building, so people feel that they can go and be active and do what works for them, have something that works for them, but actually not feel that the risk level makes that something they don't really want to consider.
And the people that will be watching today will all know how impactful Sport England is on the landscape. What commitment can you give them today to ensure that disabled people's needs are met?
I think there's two things I'd like to say, Mark. One is, referencing particularly programs like the sort of Sense Active program that Janet and Sarah have benefited from, but also so many, I know, people on this call, on this webinar, thinking about inclusive activity, that will continue to look to support inclusive activity in a very targeted way, that we actually understand that it takes perhaps different levels of investment or support or engagement and advocacy, and that there is an opportunity here. We've learned through the innovation that this period has driven that there are ways to do things differently that can support communities to be active. But then I think more fundamentally, we have an unashamed view that tackling the stubborn inequalities that exist across all aspects of physical activity and sport, actually recognizing that there are parts of our community who are less well served by the opportunity than others, that tackling those inequalities that have become very stubborn, both in the data and the activity levels that we're seeing, but also in the provision that we sort of curate and help to support. That needs to be our primary focus in our new strategy. We have an ambition to launch our new strategy in early next year for the next decade. We want to provide a common purpose for people about the purpose of being active, of movement, of playing sport, the benefit it can bring both to individuals, your physical and mental well-being, the benefit also that it can bring to communities and creating better social integration. Well, if we're going to do that, we've got to genuinely be committed to making it available to all. So, we have an overt and unashamed view that in the next period and in the next strategy for Sport England, we will be investing disproportionately in tackling those inequalities across, variety of social, geographic and demographic factors. And within that, undoubtedly and, completely explicitly will be a commitment to supporting disabled people to be more active. It's something that you mentioned briefly, my time as the chief exec at the BPA. I became passionately aware of the potential of sport to impact positively on people's lives. I think in this role, I've also become aware that there are barriers to entry that simply prevent that from being available to all. So that's where we want to put our focus.
Thanks, Tim. I'd like to, if I can, bring Barry Horne back into the conversation as we start wrapping up the discussions that we're having today. Thanks for coming back, Barry. Before we go into a bit more of the kind of nitty-gritty again, we've asked everybody about their 3 words to sum up 2020, and Huw articulated what was needed from the leisure sector. I'd like to ask you two what you consider organisations that you represent, and more broadly other organisations, what 3 words would articulate best how they can ensure that disabled people's needs are met. I'll ask you that first, Barry.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I mean, what's really come across today is the importance of listening. So the first big word for me would be listening. But I also think we need a second word, which is determination. You know, we really must drive at this opportunity. And my third word would be collaboration, because this is all about how we make this work together.
Thank you, Barry. Tim.
Yeah, good morning, Barry. I would have said actually those are good words, not least for me, the sort of sense of collaboration and how we work rather than just what we do. But I think, you know, summing up for me, for organizations looking to the future, definitely understand. I think we really need to work much harder to understand the challenges collectively that we face and individually people face. And within that is an empathy, I think, for the situation that they're in. Definitely innovate. And I mean that in a really positive way. We are learning about doing things differently. We are learning too that actually the last thing we want to do in some ways is go back to how things were before, because that would go back to the environment and the sort of ecosystem that actually prevented certain people from being active. And then act. I think act is probably the strongest word of the lot. There's so much that we can do and we need to do now to make sure that we are doing everything we can to provide the opportunities for people to engage in sport and physical activity, but also feel that public health benefit. So understand, innovate, and act are probably the three things that I would urge every organisation, including my own, to be doing in this time.
And so Tim, you've just gone through a huge process putting together the strategy for Sport England for the coming 10 years, as you said, and you mentioned that focus on those people who are most disproportionately disadvantaged in terms of accessing sport and physical activity. Can we pick a little bit deeper into how that might, what you might be looking at to achieve, and what actions, to use your word, there might be to tackle the inequality for disabled people?
Definitely. Yes. I mean, I think what we're not going to have is a massive revolution of what we're seeking to do in this new strategy. We're going to evolve very much some of the different ways of working that we've started in the last 4 or 5 years. We've understood an awful lot more, if you like, Mark, about the purpose of activity now, why it matters in people's lives, not only traditional sport, although that remains very important for many people, but also how physical activity generally is such a positive benefit to their individual lives and to communities. I think we've definitely understood, therefore, that we need to be thinking about the people that support that, whether that's the professional or the volunteer workforce, and the particular skills and experiences that are needed to help disabled people to be active is very clearly been exhibited in the last half hour. And then probably more than anything else, we've learned a huge amount about place, that where activity happens matters. And that's about both the environment people are in, the sort of the places and the spaces, the safety of them, the inclusion of them, you know, is there genuinely an environment that feels right for people? But also how can we help and support organizations that provide that? So a lot more of our strategy will be about how we operate, actually thinking about collaboration as a primary tool for Sport England, rather than just thinking that we will run programs. We actually need to think more about those who are closest in place to people's lives, who can understand them, you know, thinking about all the great organizations, you know, both within the Alliance's membership and more broadly for disabled people, understanding that it'll be them and their understanding of the environment that will help us to really reach and sustain change. So the biggest thing for the strategy is, once we have understood the very clear purpose of being active in people's lives, that our mission really will be to create an opportunity to, you know, help people who've previously been excluded to be more active, then really relentlessly focus on actually providing that in a way that makes sense, with a safe, inclusive, positive experience for all.
And Barry, what you heard what Tim said there. What does the Activity Alliance need to be able to deliver on those changes, to make those changes?
Well, you know, I mean, I think that strategic context that Tim's described is been hugely welcome. We've seen that shift over the last few years. I mentioned earlier that, as Tim did, that we were starting to see some real progress, and it is the case that, you know, even from the least active disabled people, there's a high level of demand, up around 70%. And just before COVID, we were actually seeing a recognition that actually there were more opportunities as well to be active. Those numbers were also going up. So there's a positive shift here, and that's really important. But my greatest fear is that people don't understand the extent to which, in a previous world almost, if you like, that we allowed provision to develop in a way that created this scale of inequality, particularly for disabled people. You know, that twice as inactive figure only comes from a long time of doing the wrong things in reality. And you know, so we're clear that we've got the strategic context for moving forward, but it is about taking that opportunity now and being proactively seizing, building on that demand that we know is there, thinking differently about how we plan on the recovery. And you know, I think that the messages from leadership are clear and strong. It's great to hear you as well as Tim with those levels of commitment. But what we're trying to do today and beyond today is to just make sure that we get that depth and breadth of ownership of that same ambition.
Yeah, and I would think that it's quite daunting for some organisations to know where to start in many ways, because that, as you say, there's almost a systemic history of not being inclusive or creating situations, you know, and barriers for disabled people. You know, where do people start? Where should people start, Barry?
Well, you know, I mean, I think one thing is to recognise how massively diverse provision needs to be, because how incredibly diverse choice and preference will be. So, I mean, all approaches need to be inclusive. So a key word is inclusive, but that could be from a dedicated, adapted, competitive game of sport that, you know, could lead someone to becoming a Paralympian, but it could also be from thinking about how everyday activity and sport is made inclusive. And you know, for us, there's some good evidence out there. Tim reinforced this point about place. We think there's some great evidence there about how when partners work together in localities to think differently about how they structure their response to demand, how they create a range of opportunities, but crucially how they become proactive in engaging audiences that they haven't previously engaged. That really starts to work. So, you know, one of our approaches through the Get Out, Get Active program, we're actually engaging, you know, 65% of the participants, and this is not just disabled people, this is disabled and non-disabled people active together, but 2/3 of the participants weren't active before. And it's, you know, we need to see more of those programs that get to people that perhaps weren't engaged before. And we're seeing that almost half of those participants, which might not seem perfect, but almost half of those participants remain active for the long term. You know, so if we can add to the mix more proactive approaches in localities that really do get to the least active communities, we know that will directly benefit a huge number of disabled people.
And Tim, I've got an impossible question for you, which I know you won't mind. The nirvana, the ultimate aim, is to end up with everything being fully inclusive and accessible. When might we reach that nirvana, and how much funding might we need to achieve that?
Well, obviously, as we're about to launch a strategy for the next decade, 2030, Mark, because clearly that will be the time when we've delivered everything so successfully that it's changed. I think it won't only be about funding, by the way. Funding will be a key part of it, but I think it's also very much about perception and attitude. I think it's also about a regulation. I mean, you know, whether that's in the public health space that Huw mentioned. Actually, I should say, and I want to say very clearly that the example that Sarah gave at the end there with Janet about not being able to helper in the gym because social distancing. Actually, the regulations exempt carers. So it's really important that people know that carers in this context can be exempted from social distancing to enable physical activity. That's an example where we can continually try and break down some of those barriers. Then some of the inclusivity that we're seeking can happen because people feel it's possible rather than, you know, feeling previously that it was being prevented. But the single biggest thing for me, I think, is leadership. I think it's beholden on those, and I include Sport England in this, but many of the organisations on this call, that we continue to advocate for that nirvana, that we don't believe that it's not something that should not only be possible, but fundamentally right as far as sport and physical activity is concerned, and then continually think about what the barriers are that we need to overcome. And I certainly think that one of the biggest, most powerful things that Sport England can do for the next decade is advocate for the purpose of activity in people's lives, advocate for the role that sport plays in communities, and advocate powerfully for why it matters that everyone should have the ability to be active. And I think that will be our best route to securing that nirvana, because then we'll use the resources, we'll use the funding, we'll use the people, we'll use the regulations to then try and work behind and achieve that goal. But if we're actually conscious that our power lies in championing primarily, then I think we can make a real difference.
And Barry, would you like to respond to that? I'm sure.
Well, I mean, I just reinforce that length of time that we need to work at this proactively, and you know, our emerging vision is that we close that fairness gap, that gap between activity levels between disabled and non-disabled people, and we're saying within a generation, you know, 20 to 25 years, because I think there's some real work to get to a point where I would hope that an organisation like Activity Alliance wouldn't need to exist, because disabled people will be just as likely to be active as non-disabled people.
Well, thank you, Tim. Thank you, Barry, for your insights and input today. I'd like to invite Sarah to come back on to close the event. And I just, before I go, would like to just say that I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much for inviting me. There's been an incredible number of points raised, and I hope it infuses everybody that's on this call and who watches this webinar later to be those advocates and make that change.
Brilliant, thank you, Mark. I mean, I had things to say actually as part of the script, but how do you follow some of those stories we've heard today? And I've written words such as confidence, leadership. And you know, Janet probably talked more emotionally about the actual social connection that we need from activity and sport. And I think one thing is clear is that we could have done a whole day event and we would have never covered everybody's story. So thank you, Mark, as a brilliant host. You've been awesome. And thank you to our speakers who have been brilliant too. One thing's clear: in the next days, weeks, whatever is held in the next few years, we can't do it alone. So collaboration will be the key word moving forward. Activity Alliance is here to help. So if you do need anything in terms of support or advice, we are here. If it's not available on our website, our team is ready and waiting for your inquiries. Please join us in actually making this happen, because we can't do it alone, and disabled people cannot be forgotten as we move forward into the future. Whatever happens, strategies and conversations need to have inclusion at the heart of them. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, everyone.